world of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. It's the David Knight Show.
As the clock strikes 13, it's Monday, May the 4th. May the 4th be with you on this 2026 year, and we're going to need it. We have a lot of things in front of us here. What would Rush say, by the way? We're going to begin with that today. What would Rush Limbaugh say about Donald Trump? Remember his mantra that he did over and over and over again? Yeah, we went to war for the free flow of oil at market prices. Well, guess what? Kuwait has now shut down their exports for the first time since he was saying that 35 years ago. And of course, we have airlines crashing big time, total loss, not just one or two planes, all of them gone. This is all a result of what Trump has done. And meanwhile, we have Ben Shapiro's Daily Wire is turning into the Daily Quagmire. We're going to talk about how Ben Shapiro jumped the snark. And then, of course, Richard Dawkins came down with an AI psychosis last week. The Claude delusion. We're going to talk about that, as well as lawfare, censorship. John Kerry says we can't have a First Amendment. Mike Johnson says we can't have warrants. Maybe we shouldn't have either one of them. Yeah, let's talk about this free flow of oil at market prices idea. And of course, we were kind of debating this with the family over the weekend. What would Rush Limbaugh say about what Donald Trump is doing? And I think we came to the conclusion that he would oppose it, and then he would reverse himself if he got to spend a night in the Lincoln bedroom. So Kuwait has exported 0 barrels of oil for the first time in 35 years. And of course, Kuwait is now a major U.S. ally in the Middle East, hosting about 13,500 American troops. As Trump is drawing down troops in Germany finally, this is the, he's probably going to put them in the Middle East. He's probably not going to bring them home to serve America, to keep America safe. It is a key logistical hub for the U.S. empire. Kuwait previously produced about 2.7 million barrels per day and exported about 1.85 million barrels per day. Most shipments going to Asian markets. But on April the 17th, the Kuwait Petroleum Corporation declared force majeure. In other words, what they're saying is we can't honor our contracts because of forces outside of our control. Well, what happened around April 17th? Well, that was 4 days after Trump got the genius idea that he was going to do a blockade himself. He did that on April the 13th. And remember, Mark Levin said, that was my idea. It's like, you get full credit, pal. Just like Trump gets full credit in my book for being the vax daddy, the father of the vaccine. Mark Levin, father of the Israeli blockade, or the blockade for Israel. And so after that was put in, the Strait of Hormuz was effectively closed. Both sides saying that they were not going to allow ships through there. And so they declared force majeure. We can't honor our contracts. However, it has continued to fall, the amount of shipments that they have put out, to the point where they have gotten 0 out right now. It's the first time they've had 0 barrels of oil since the 1990-91 Gulf War. During that conflict, Iraqi forces under Hussein invaded Kuwait, prompting a U.S.-led coalition to launch a military campaign that forced their withdrawal in early 1991. Remember, we had the stories about the babies in incubators being taken out by those dastardly Iraqis. Well, it turned out that wasn't true. And that's why, Rush Limbaugh was out there saying, let's understand, this is about one thing and one thing only. That's the free flow of oil at market prices. We don't want to have Iraq get control of the Kuwaiti oil fields. We want to save that for Israel. So crude has climbed above $120 per barrel in recent days. Highest level it's had since 2022. And of course, what happened in 1990 was that oil doubled in price, a little bit more than doubled. I think it started out at about $17 or something, wound up like $40, somewhere in that neighborhood. I mean, it's amazingly cheap when you look at it, but a lot of that is inflation. A lot of that is stupid government policies. But again, Trump is the dictator who likes war. He doesn't want the flow of oil, and he doesn't have anything but contempt for market pricing. We can see that from the very beginning of his administration. So it was a mantra, really, for Rush Limbaugh. I remember the early days around 1990, I was probably still listening to him as I spent a lot of time in the car going between locations. And this free flow of oil at market prices was really hammered by him. He argued any interruption to this flow was a potential disaster that would justify military intervention. What about if our military intervention was the very thing that shut down the free flow of oil at market prices? According to Limbaugh, the world functions on the free flow of oil, and the U.S. holds a dominant position in setting prices due to rising production. He said fossil fuels are essential for sustaining modern infrastructure, including electricity, heating, transportation, and replacing them with renewable resources would lead to economic and social instability. Well, we're going to find out just how bad that is, because it's not just the oil that is used for fuel, to run power plants, to run vehicles and that type of thing, but it's also all these ancillary products that we're seeing out there. The fertilizer that's used to grow plants, the helium that is used to produce microchips. I mean, there's so many different aspects of this. All of that got shut down. And so his argument was used to justify the Iraq War, but it's also the best argument to use against Trump, quite frankly. Critics argued that Limbaugh used this phrase to misinform listeners about the true motivations behind foreign wars. And it would be mercenary if that were true. Again, he didn't address the moral issue here. That is simply a mercenary, pragmatic issue. It doesn't talk about the legal aspects. It doesn't talk about the moral aspects. Those are far more important. But again, he was just talking about the pragmatic economic aspects of this. But they point out that prioritizing the interest of a plutocracy and the interests of geopolitical alliances over the economic needs of ordinary Americans was what he was really selling. And so isn't it interesting that when we push a war because we want free flow of oil at market prices, and when we push a war that stops all of that, we always come back to the same things, don't we? It's like the MacGuffin. So we don't really care about the economic needs of ordinary Americans. That's not the calculus with war, with anything that they do. And it doesn't matter whether this is 1990 or whether it's 2025. What is good for ordinary Americans is not in the calculus of people like George H.W. Bush, Rush Limbaugh, or Donald Trump. Certainly not Donald Trump. We can see that's verified right now. They prioritize their geopolitical goals, as I say, with Trump, is even worse than that. He is not a great strategist. He is a narcissist, not a strategist. This is about ego politics, not geopolitics. It's about egonomics. It's not about economics. So we just need to understand the difference between all this stuff. Not only is it illegal and immoral, but it is also impractical and boneheaded stupid. And so, again, he went on and on and on about the free flow of oil at market prices. Well, Trump is out there now bragging about the fact, he says, we're like pirates. And it's very profitable being a pirate. That's all that made me think of Pirates of Penzance. It is a glorious thing to be a pirate king, as they said, right? That's not the line. But yeah, he's out there bragging about this. You know, the funny thing about it is, that's why I say this guy is trolling people. He doesn't even see the lies and the contradictions as he's saying them. He was just, the Iranians were just appealing to the UN, saying the U.S. is acting like pirates. And then he comes out and says, yeah, we are pirates. They've been pirates of the Caribbean. So now they're going to be pirates of Hormuz.
I'm going to get a fancy pirate hat and a fancy getup. It's going to be great.
That's right. He says, we land on top of these ships, and we take over the ship, we took over the cargo, we took over the oil. It's a very profitable business. We're like pirates. We're sort of like pirates, except we're not playing games. Well, I don't know the pirates play games.
Yeah, pirates known for their love of fun, you know.
Maybe he's watched Gilbert and Sullivan, you think? I don't think so.
Get on the ground. We are going to play Twister.
Yeah, we are single gentlemen, and we propose to marry your daughters. So yeah, maybe that's the kind of pirates that he knows about, the pirates of Penzance. It precisely echoes Tehran's own accusations that the Pentagon is indeed engaged in piracy in the Persian Gulf. As a matter of fact, I said this before. I had a guy who contacted me. He's like a former administrator or military or something like that. He wanted to talk about how this is totally justified what we're doing. Look at Jefferson went after the Barbary pirates and he shut them down. You know, that's why we have in the Marine hymn, we have the shores of Tripoli. But I said, no, but in this case, we are the pirates. In this case, we are the barbarians. This week, Iran issued formal request to UN Security Council to stop the continuing, quote unquote, continuing international wrongful acts of the United States through yet another piracy-style seizure and deliberate targeting of commercial vessels. I named a couple of the ships. You know, it's interesting. I really enjoyed the interview I had with the guy who was with the ATF, but I'm sure you all caught the fact. He said, when he's talking about this informant, which he really likes, and he wrote a whole book about how the guy was screwed by the government, but then he talks about, well, we came after him because he had some minor tobacco discrepancies or whatever. We really just wanted his Cadillac. He had a great Cadillac. And if we take the Cadillac, we get to use it ourselves. It's like, yeah, I noticed. I've been talking about that civil asset forfeiture for a long time. We should send that interview to Megyn Kelly so she can understand what civil asset forfeiture looks like if she cared, which she doesn't. Just amazing. The piracy that our government has been doing domestically, then foreign piracy, then just flat out killing people and murdering them on the high seas. I don't know that even the pirates would have done the kind of cold-blooded murder that Pete Hegseth did, going back and shooting up the shipwrecked survivors. I mean, you know, you got an amazing article we're going to get to here later on. And it's Steve Watson, Paul Watson's brother, writing an article about how a Democrat said, you know, what War Pete is doing is a war crime. And that's the kind of war crimes that we've executed people for. And he says, imagine this. This is taking this all to new heights. Look at these Democrats, how they're getting so threatening. They want to execute people who execute people. Yeah, if you're running a military and you machine gun people in the water, that's the kind of thing that Nazis did, the sub-commanders did, that hit a ship, and as the people are struggling to survive after they've hit the ship, they would then kill the survivors. That's what we're doing. So, of course, he deserves to be tried and executed, in my opinion, as well. He absolutely deserves that. How do we say that we did? Because he doesn't speak German? Is that how he gets a pass? He doesn't speak Christian either, by the way, folks. Pete Hegseth denies Christ in all that he does. Publicly, he is a reproach to the name of Christ. I wish you would stop it. I just cannot stand watching the guy. Sort of like pirates? No, Donnie said Iran, that's a textbook piracy. One upside to an incompetent opponent is moments like this. Iran is laughing at him. They're talking about how incompetent and stupid he is because he's actually admitting that he is a pirate. He said, but the crowd cheering and clapping along, that is the truly disturbing part. Yes, it is. The U.S. urgently needs swift and serious regime change. I couldn't agree more with that. I find myself agreeing with the Iranian foreign ministry when he says, yeah, you are acting like a pirate and you're so stupid you admit it. And the really disturbing part are the people who are cheering it on. And for the most part, I think that's the Zionists, because Trump's popularity, especially on this war, has gotten so small that I think he's only got Christian and Jewish Zionists who are applauding him on this. Everybody else has turned against it. Russia, RT, had this to say. They said the only good thing about Trump is that he openly admits that the U.S. is a rogue state that doesn't care at all about international law. He doesn't even bother to cover up the U.S. heinous actions with bogus liberal public relations language that previous presidents used. It's also akin to when Trump became the first U.S. leader to declare that American troops were in Syria to, quote, secure the oil, actually to take it. Contradicting prior presidents and officials who insisted that Washington was merely engaged in counter-ISIS operations, which we all knew that the U.S. government was helping ISIS. Now they help to put in a guy who has a long rap sheet. He was with the Mujahideen, Al-Qaeda, ISIS. He was with Al-Nusra, all these different organizations. Now he's running Syria, and guess what they're doing? They're massacring Christians and Alawites. This is what happens whenever the U.S. government goes into an area. They go into these areas where Christians have been involved in a community, part of a community, had their historic sites for millennia. We go in, all of a sudden, all the Christians are being killed by the people that we put in. Seeing this over and over and over again. Everywhere we go, we create chaos, disorder, death, persecution. That's the product of this cursed American empire, the District of Curses, Washington, D.C. So anyway, it's just unashamed mafia, unashamed organized crime from the dawn of the mafia. Iran's Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesperson said that Americans have an undeniable right and the solemn duty to demand accountability from the White House over the ongoing U.S.-Israel war of choice against Iran. He said the war is a clear, unprovoked act of aggression. He's absolutely right. So was Venezuela. How many of these do we have to have? Is he going to go into Greenland? Certainly Denmark and France took him seriously enough that they set up an event that was billed as a practice, right? A joint exercise. But they're actually trying to set up things to defend the country from an American attack. You should take this guy seriously. He truly is insane and criminal. The criminally insane President Trump. They called Americans to rise up and challenge their leaders for waging this illegal war and for all of the atrocities that have been perpetrated. Yeah, what goes around comes around. You push revolution and assassination in other countries, they're going to push that back here. You push terrorism and bombs and drop bombs on other countries, they're going to do the same thing here as well. The so-called national security military-industrial complex is making this country far less safe. They are storing up wrath that at some point is going to be unleashed on this country. If it's not unleashed by the people that we've been unleashing our wrath of choice on, it'll be unleashed on this country by God. Chevron, ConocoPhillips warn about critical shortages of oil, soaring prices, and demand destruction. That's the thing they're concerned about, demand destruction. You know, and this is the other part of it. All these MAGA people out there, oh, this is genius. Look at what Trump has done. He has secured, we're self-sufficient in oil and a net exporter of oil. So let's destroy the oil in other countries as well. Well, again, that's going to help the elite. It's not going to help us, but it's also not going to help the elite for very long, because if you create these kind of critical shortages out of desperation, people will find other ways to produce food, to produce semiconductors or whatever. There will be demand destruction. That's what the oil companies are worried about. They've got record prices right now. Even though they're selling less oil, they're making a lot more money doing it. Same thing that happened with Vladimir Putin after the Biden sanctions. After the Biden sanctions, Russia started accepting payment in gold. They offered a deep discount to people if they would pay them in gold, and because it got cut out of the financial system by Biden. And the bottom line is that even with a deep discount, they were selling their oil at a higher price than they had before Biden shut it down. So most of the world's energy giants, including Exxon and Chevron, reported stellar earnings and surging oil prices that more than offset the curtailed output. However, ConocoPhillips warned of imminent critical shortages of oil for some nations as they call it the Iran war. No, it is the Zionist Trump war. Let's just get that straight. We hear all this time, well, COVID did this to us, or COVID. No, it was Trump who did it. It was Trump, or it was Macron, or it was Boris Johnson, whoever your leader was. They all did it at the same time. Let's not talk about this ridiculous MacGuffin called COVID. COVID didn't do anything to anybody. They were the ones telling you had to put a mask on your face and you could only walk one way through the grocery store and out. And they did that in Austin. I couldn't believe it. No, you can't come in this door. You got to go in the other door and then come out this door. It's like, what are you talking? Things on the floor. Remember all that stuff? Yeah, don't step on a crack. You'll break your mother's back. We're back in elementary school again. I don't play those games. Just crazy. But yeah, the Trump war has crippled global energy flows. Now, for the third month, the biggest challenge we're about to face is that the markets sort of had a bit of a grace period initially when the tankers that left the Persian Gulf in late February were still on the water. Now, all of those have reached their destination. That oil is gone. He said, we're going to start seeing some import-dependent countries potentially start to face critical shortages as we get into the June-July timeframe, at which point the dreaded demand destruction kicks in. Oil refiners around the world have responded to the Trump war by curbing daily processing rates by roughly 8 million barrels, roughly the amount that has been blockaded by Trump. So you see, as much as he may hate the market will adjust and nullify much of what he does. It's kind of the same thing they do with interest rates. The Federal Reserve comes out and by fiat, they raise or lower the interest rates to manipulate the economy. Well, that only works to a degree because the market will look at this, the collective wisdom of the market will look at it and will say, well, yeah, but if they lower the interest rate and that policy is going to create inflation, that means that if I'm going to loan somebody money for 30 years, I have to factor that inflation in. So actually the home mortgage rates would go up. The problem is the market is smarter than the central planners. And I don't care if you're the smartest person in the room. You could be a whiz kid like Robert McNamara, who was so impressed with his own wisdom as he ran the Vietnam War into the ground. But the problem with central planners is they don't have sufficient information. They may be smarter than everybody else, but the market in a truly free market, the freer the market, the better this works. In a truly free market, you have the collective wisdom of a lot of us with average intelligence. And guess what? A massive network of average intelligence beats one CPU. It's kind of like a neural network versus a CPU. And so skyrocketing prices for everything from jet fuel and gasoline to fertilizer. And of course, it's jet fuel that has gone up more than anything else. Diesel has gone up more than gasoline, and jet fuel has gone up the most of anything. It's skyrocketed. That's why the airlines are crashing to the ground. Added, his company is speaking with Trump administration on an almost constant basis, he said. Yeah, let's see what we can do for the elites. The rest of us can go pound sand, right? The largest U.S. oil executives to share concerns that the world's extra supply of oil stored on land and at sea could be running out if the Strait of Hormuz remains closed, which is why the people on Wall Street are reminding each other, Nacho, not a chance Hormuz opens, right? So factor that in to your decisions about what you're going to buy and sell on Wall Street. So as we look at the economic fallout of this, we have falling airlines. Spirit Airlines shut down over the weekend abruptly. As a matter of fact, I saw an article about a guy who was ready to retire, and it was going to be his very last flight. I don't know, he'd done his 25, 30 years or something for the airlines as a pilot. And his final flight got canceled. So he hopped on board as kind of a courtesy thing. His son is a navigator for a competing airline. He got him on which is what they do for airline personnel typically. You know, you can hop on and travel for free to a particular destination. And got him on for free. They found out it was going to be his final flight that got canceled, and that he'd had X number of years. And so that competing airline, no longer competing, I guess, because the other one is gone. But anyway, those people arranged a celebration for him both on the plane and as he landed, which is kind of nice.
I'm really sad about Spirit closing because where am I going to get to watch all these terminal brawls now? You know, it's just not going to be the same. I'm not going to be able to go to YouTube and look up Spirit Airlines fight. It's all going to be past tense. I'm not going to get any new ones.
Somebody did an AI version of that, and it was really pretty funny. It had all the brawls that were in there. And, of course, that's what they became known for, because they were aggressively discount. And I guess could say that they attracted a lower clientele.
You get what you pay for.
Anyway, $500 million government bailout was what they were looking for, and I'm not a big fan of bailouts. However, when you look at the kind of situation, isn't this kind of the Trump pattern? Are we seeing a pattern here? Remember when he was destroying businesses left and right during COVID lockdown? And remember when they came through and said, okay, we'll give you a stimulus check and we'll give you the thing to help you if you're a small business, except that most of the money went to the big businesses because Trump redefined what a small business was. It wasn't a business with fewer than 500 employees. It was a business that had fewer than 500 employees at one location, which allowed him to have his organizations qualify, as well as some of the largest corporations that were out there. So more than 50% of the CARES Act went to less than 5% of the people. The big guys always make out, don't they? And so bailouts, not for the little guys. No, the bailouts were for the big guys. So Spirit Airlines was not too big to fail, not too big to fall. So they did fall. Meanwhile, we have Americans spending $125 million more on gas Friday than they did a week ago. A 33-cent jump in the price of regular gasoline in a single week is hitting wallets fast. And the summer driving season is still away. How does Trump think he's going to win an election? How do the Republicans think they're going to win an election? These people are so mesmerized by Trump. And, of course, there was a real kind of a comical interview that Tucker Carlson had in the New York Times. He said, he's like, he casts a spell on people. I think he casts a spell on me. There's something about him that's supernatural when you're in his presence. Is it? Or is it Trump, or is it the power that comes with him? That's what's putting you under a trance? Money and power, right? You can just feel the money and power oozing off of the guy. So you do whatever he says. And they don't even look down the road to think what's going to happen. Remember, the economy, stupid. The economy is based on this. It is, it's all upstream from this. And so if you add this value-added tax of energy to everything, it's going to be tremendous in terms of price inflation. The average price for a gallon of gas is now $4.39 as of Friday. So they figured out, based on the consumptions out there, consumers were taxed by Trump another $125 million. And that's not counting all the weapons, the billions of dollars that they wasted in just the first couple of days of this elective war. Trump said Iran's oil industry, however, is facing disaster. Oh, so it's all worth it, right? We can destroy the American economy. We can destroy the world's economy. We can destroy the airline industry. I mean, it's not just the discounters like Spirit Airlines. You got some major carriers like Lufthansa, the German carrier, that I think it was last week, it was 1,000 flights that they have now removed. And when you look, the price of fuel is just astronomical for these people. And so it is rapidly bringing all this stuff to the ground. When we look at what the government has done to travel, And I've said this before, the 20th century was when you look at airline travel, it was a century of innovation and advancement. You went from the Wright brothers to 747 and all the rest of the stuff, and everybody was able to fly. It was an amazing achievement. Then the government got involved, and the government created this false flag event right along the lines of Operation Northwoods, where they said, "Oh, let's fly planes in the buildings, and let's blame it on some country so we can go to war with them." With Operation Northwoods, the country was Cuba, but they did it again with Afghanistan. Once they did that, now we're going to use that as an excuse for the police surveillance state, creation of Homeland Security, creation of TSA, and all the rest of the stuff. And it has been rapidly downhill since then. Then you add Trump, and he is basically going to implement, if he keeps going down this road, there's no evidence that he's going to get smart enough to turn around and take an exit. But this is what the World Economic Forum, his pals there, he's gone to Davos many times. He is not opposed to Davos. If you look at what he did in 2020, it was a perfect matchup with what they wanted. He moved the Overton window for everything the World Economic Forum has been demanding for a very long time. And he's doing that again now. They don't want you flying. This is one way to do it. They want to price you out of being able to fly. And so he is saying that Iran is going to have to shut down their oil industry. He said once they shut it down, they'll never be able to open it up again the way they want to. He said, you can't rebuild it the way it was. But despite the president's prediction of impending disaster in Iran, industry experts and analysts warned that the scenario is unlikely. Iran has weeks or even months before it risks running out of places to store oil. Even if the country's storage becomes full, there's a disagreement about how much, if any, permanent damage this would cause. They said one energy scholar, who was director of the Middle East program at the foreign policy think tank Defense Priorities, said of Trump's predictions that Iran's oil pipelines would soon detonate, that its energy industry is on the verge of collapse. She said, nothing is going to self-destruct. And this is the thing. Imagine if Trump were telling the truth. Would it be worth it to do this kind of damage to the airline industry, this kind of damage to Europe, this kind of damage to the American consumer, the American economy? Would all that be worth it to take down Iran? I mean, this is like a suicide pact. When we look at the Kool-Aid cult of MAGA, this is what it's become. These people out there who are cheering this war have become a suicidal cult, like Jonestown. Interesting, because Alex Jones helped to set this cult up. Anyway, a fellow in energy and global oil at Rice University said Iran has proven it knows how to keep its systems operating. Yeah, Trump has proven that he doesn't know or doesn't care how to keep our systems operating. He's done everything he can to throw a monkey wrench into our infrastructure. During the 2-month conflict, the president and his administration have shifted their stated goals for the war. They have issued a succession of evolving and sometimes contradictory claims about when the Strait of Hormuz would open. This is the thing about Trump. He can't get through a statement or a speech or a tweet without contradicting himself. Sometimes even within the same tweet or speech, but always contradicting what he said earlier in the day or a day before or whatever. During the 2-month conflict, the president and his administration have shifted their stated goals for the war and issued a succession of evolving, sometimes contradictory claims. In other words, they're lying, right? So it's another policy position that's rooted more in hope than in reality. We are banking on being saved by a silver bullet that is flawed in a number of ways, said another person at another energy analysis institution. The latest theory of victory is that they have seized on is not because it makes a lot of sense, but because it is quick, easy, and has a time frame that they like. In other words, they're just doing PR spin. And they've been doing PR spin so much to everybody else. They're kind of guilty of believing it themselves, perhaps, because they live in this little bubble. Well, an ex-CIA analyst warns that Hegseth's claim of an ironclad Hormuz blockade is deeply misleading. This is Larry Johnson who wrote this. He said, Hegseth is lying. Oh, that's not news. After more than 2 weeks, War Pete has been saying the U.S. blockade is working and getting stronger, describing it as, quote, ironclad. He said, we're tightening it by the hour. And we're even going global, he said. The Navy, he said, has turned back 34 ships. And he said the blockade will last, quote, as long as it takes. We don't care how much damage we do to Iran, to America, to the world. Let's just burn it all down. These guys are going to be taken out. We need to 86 this entire administration. And I mean by that, take them off the menu. That's what the word means. Come on. And they're out there pretending that 86 means that you're threatening to kill somebody. They're the ones who are threatening to kill people. By the way, even when we go back to this 8647, we're laughing about this over the weekend. Karen said, yeah, I was talking about how much it grates on me to hear these people say, for 47 years, Iran has been doing such and such, right? It's like, no, you started the attacks 72 years ago, 73 years ago, sorry, 1953. They overthrew the Iranian election and they put in a dictator king. Sound familiar? And he set up a surveillance police state with the Savak. The CIA and Mossad helped him do that. And so the aggression began 73 years ago. I hate to see that. Just like I hate the people selling this climate MacGuffin. They always go back to a little mini ice age in the mid-1800s. And that's their starting point. Well, everything got warmer for there. So there's my thesis, proven right there. No, it doesn't prove anything. And it doesn't prove anything for you to go back to 1979. That's not when our involvement with Iran began. They suffered for 20 plus years under the Shah and Savak before they did anything about it. So again, what we need to do is we need to 86 that 47-year narrative. That fundamental lie that is there. That needs to be 86'd. So Hegseth warned the U.S. would shoot to destroy, quote unquote, any Iranian boats laying mines or otherwise threatening commercial shipping. Here's what the available data tells us, however, about the Strait of Hormuz. The daily volumes around April the 15th alone, there were 19 transits, 5 inbound, 14 outbound. The overall picture since April the 15th is a precise cumulative total from April 15th through April 30th. He says it's not available in a single figure, but daily transits have been running roughly in the range of 6 to 21 ships per day. Rough estimate somewhere in the ballpark of 100 to 200 total transits over a 15-day stretch since April the 15th, though the true number could be higher due to GPS spoofing. He said, I can't comment on GPS spoofing, but I can say with certainty that War Pete is spoofing the American public about the effectiveness of this blockade. The bottom line is that even if it is a leaky sieve, they are still restraining the flow enough to cause big problems because they used to have hundreds of ships go through a day. And so if you're down to just a couple of dozen, that is still destructive. Hegseth perfidy, to understand it, you need to understand the U.S. Navy doctrine for handling a blockade. The U.S. Navy's approach to taking control of a ship that is seized during a blockade. First of all, think about this. And think about if we saw any of this happen in Venezuela. I know we talked about this when it was happening. And we had Marky Mark who said, I used to work on one of these ships, and they had a very precise routine for how they would handle this. And they had lawyers and all the rest of this stuff because they were going to board these drug ships, and they wanted to make sure they didn't destroy the case that they had. But he points out the Navy doctrine is, number one, you do interception warning. Then comes boarding, then comes taking control, and then there's all the different things that you have to do post-seizure. Well, they just blew all this off and murdered people in Venezuela. They're not doing that again now. I mean, again, this Trump regime is criminal, piratical. It is disgusting beyond belief. Blockades are acts of war that require effective enforcement. The U.S. Navy is keeping the ships 200 miles off the coast of Iran, but the Iranian ships, when they leave port, normally stay within 50 miles of the Iranian coast, which means that they're outside the reach of the U.S. Navy. So 52 Iranian vessels have crossed a U.S.-imposed blockade of Iranian waters within a 72-hour period. So it's not ironclad, is it? The U.S., by the way, has spent more on defense than the next 8 countries combined. Are we getting any safer? When will we be safe enough that we can stop this? Now, this is an empire that is feeding on itself, and we're not getting any safer at all. As a matter of fact, they were looking at this in 2025. Of course, the budget was $921 billion for defense. Then they took it up to over $1 trillion. That was a record. So this is even worse than when they got these numbers. But took it over $1 trillion. Now they want to jump that immediately as soon as they hit a new record and went over $1 trillion. They turned right around and said, all right, now we need 50% more. We're already spending more than the next 8 countries combined. We set a new record, and immediately they demand a 50% increase. Do you see how insane and uncontrolled this government is? It truly is insane.
Your budget requests $31.8 billion to expand production capacity for critical missile stockpiles. Is that correct? 31.8?
I'm looking at $53 billion for munitions acceleration.
Your
Even more.
department has released video after video of things blowing up. None of us doubt the strength of the U.S. military and their ability to do hard things. The questions we should be asking and answering are, what does this cost us and what does it achieve for the American people? Many of these strikes use our best weapons, and we're using a lot of them. We can't make these munitions overnight. Can you tell us how many years specifically is it going to take to replace these systems?
I would defer to the comptroller on the amount. I actually think it's closer to $330 billion in munitions.
How many
Ultimately,
years to replenish?
I said months.
And then you said years. So
and
we
we're
fired
rapidly doing
years
it quickly.
worth of munitions. But, Mr. Secretary, this war is stuck. The Strait of Hormuz is
And it
closed.
sucks.
The Iranian regime is in place. The nuclear material still in their hands. Americans are being crushed by higher costs. And it's not clear to them at all what the goal of this war is.
Yeah, what is the goal? Well, I think the goal of the military-industrial complex is to spend more money. It's always been the goal. It is. It's just this machine that can't get satisfied. It's insatiable. Russia's defense budget, for example, $186 billion. I mean, we're talking about multiples of that just for this little escapade that he's doing here. And if they get their way, and if they get up to $1.5 trillion, we'll have a budget that's about 10 times the size of Russia. Do we really need that? Not to defend this country, we don't. Absolutely do not need that to defend this country. We need it for an American empire that's doing the kind of nonsense, the kind of evil that is being done in Iran right now. Russia's defense budget of $186 billion, which would be a tenth of what Trump and War Pete want. That's a budget that went up by 40% in 1 year. Their budget, because of their absurd war with Ukraine. And it is now 7.3% of their GDP. We're going down the same road. And when you look at their piracy and their rules of engagement, the U.S. Coast Guard offloaded more than $72 million worth of cocaine. And did they not murder anybody? You know, the Trump administration never got any cocaine out of these things. And they don't even know if it was on the ships. Didn't bother to look. And as I said before, you know, when you got these record amounts of interdiction that are still going on as you've got Southern Command, or whatever they call it, that is in charge of what's happening down in Venezuela, they are still blowing up ships down there. without ascertaining what is on them or if these people are drug smugglers. And again, 25% of the ships that they stop that they think are drug smugglers are not. So you can't profile these ships and then just kill everybody on them. When they got these ships and took off $72 million worth of cocaine, they didn't line the people up on the side of the ship and execute them. There's nothing here about these people even being arrested. And many people pointed out, a lot of the people that were trafficking this stuff, they don't even bother to run them through the system. They just said, we just want to get the cocaine off of the market. I wonder what they do with it. It's going to be a big party at Mar-a-Lago, I guess. But seizures are a result of 3 interdictions in the Caribbean by the crews of the USS Billings and the Coast Guard cutter Tahoma. And yet nobody died. How could that be? And that is happening even as the U.S. has conducted numerous recent strikes against suspected drug trafficking vessels. Southern Command announced a strike on a drug trafficking vessel in the Eastern Pacific, which resulted in the deaths of 2 individuals. So, depending on which bureaucracy from this disgusting government we have, so-called government, if you are noticed by the military, they'll just kill you. If you're noticed by some of the people that are associated with the Coast Guard or whatever, they'll do an interdiction and take the drugs. I mean, it's just rolling the dice as to who you're going to come in contact with because they play by different rules. As a matter of fact, the military has no rules anymore. Military strikes have come under criticism. You better believe they have. The Inter-American Commission on Human Rights was meeting. At the hearing, they said the U.S. has launched 45 armed attacks as part of the strikes in international waters as of March the 12th, killing an estimated 157 individuals. They acted unilaterally. They acted in violation of international law and their use of force. Meanwhile, a spokesperson for the State Department said that this organization, the IACHR, had, quote, strayed far outside of its mandate and acted beyond its competence. I think we could say the same thing about the Pentagon, couldn't we? I mean, this looks like projection from the Pentagon. What the Pentagon has done is they've strayed outside of their mandate and they've acted beyond their competence. That's what they're doing under War Pete. The U.S. called on the IACHR to, quote, focus on its statutes and its rules of procedure rather than inserting itself into matters that fall outside their sphere. Again, more projection, isn't it? How about if the Pentagon were to focus on its statutes, on its rules of engagement? How about if it were to pay attention to, let's say, even the Geneva Convention and international law? And then at some point in time, they could look at the Constitution they swore to uphold. That'd be nice, wouldn't it? Each strike against a drug vessel operated by designated terror organizations is taken to protect the United States and to defend vital American interests, said the Trump regime. That is a total lie, like everything that comes from this Trump regime. So as I said before, you have Steve Watson wringing his hand saying, you got Democrat representatives suggesting that Hegseth could be executed for war crimes like Nazi submarine captains. Well, yeah, if justice were to be done, but I don't expect any justice is going to be done. Again, that what goes around comes around, and that could imply lethality if your entire department is going to be focused on killing people, not on defending this country, not on staying within the lines that you must stay in. If you're going to act like a criminal, like a pirate, like an assassin, this might catch up with you even in this life, let alone the next life. But Watson puts it this way. He says, in a stunning escalation of partisan rhetoric, give me a break. He said, they compared the U.S. military operations against drug smuggling boats to the actions of Nazi submarine captains who executed people who were shipwrecked after World War II. Watson, that is not an exaggeration. That is the truth. What's the matter with you? What have you become? Why do you think they have those rules at the Pentagon? It's precisely because that's what was done by Nazi sub-captains. And it's exactly what is being done by War Pete. Instead of backing efforts to secure the homeland, he said. Watson is saying, this guy should be cheering Homeland Security. He should be cheering the Trump regime. Instead, he's pushing back on this stuff. What about the war on drugs? Don't we want to win that? Come on, guys. Hey, Watson, you're pathetic. You're pathetic. You become a sold-out statist simply because you want to grift on Trump's back. I despise that, quite frankly. Users reacting in disbelief at a sitting congressman invoking execution rhetoric against a Trump cabinet official. Well, some of us have disbelief when this administration turned into open murdering thugs. In the past, they used to at least have the decency to try to hide that kind of thing. Not that they didn't do it, but they would at least try to hide it. It's just like Trump's adultery. He parades it out there when he kicks his wife to the curb. He parades his adultery out there. Democrats framing routine counter-narcotics operations. Yeah, Watson, this is nothing routine about this. If you hadn't noticed, and this is Steve Watson, if you hadn't noticed, this war on drugs has been a failure for 54 years. So everybody wants to talk, well, we got a 47-year history with Iran. Well, we got a 54-year history with the UN war on drugs. That's right, it was the UN's war on drugs. It wasn't even Richard Nixon, as bad as that would be. He's just turning in his homework from the United Nations. That's what Richard Nixon was doing. It is pathetic. It is childish cheerleading for illegal organization that is based on murder. Yeah, so Trump is doing more damage to airlines than I think 9/11 did. It truly is insane. And Ann Coulter blames him for his pointless Iran war, which is exactly right. She said that's the final death knell for Spirit Airlines. So again, they needed a bailout of $500 million. And like I said before, it is a familiar pattern of Trump policy, throwing a monkey wrench into the economy and the infrastructure and taking struggling businesses down and then deciding as an afterthought, well, maybe we'll give them a bailout or something. So Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy denied that the soaring cost of jet fuel due to the Iran war was to blame. No, I'm sure that increasing the price of jet fuel by more than 50% in a very short period of time had nothing to do with it, right? And that's why you got more solid airlines like Lufthansa is shutting down 1,000 different flights because of the fuel costs. So Ann Coulter said it was high fuel costs that were the final death knell for the Spirit. We all know that. This is like, they come up with these absurd lies, just like they did about the killings in Minnesota on the street. Everybody has seen this. Everybody knows what's going on. And then they come in after the fact and just lie to your face. And the Kool-Aid MAGA cult goes along with it. They yell and scream at everybody to fall in line. Coulter agreed with MS Now commentator Stephanie Rule, who said Spirit danced with bankruptcy and was plagued by management issues. Then this unprofitable organization, with almost no cushion, got hit with a soaring jet fuel costs. That's the story. She said 2 things can be true. Number one, the Biden administration blocked a JetBlue Spirit merger. They said it was going to be too much market consolidation. Except now it looks like maybe both of them may go out of business. The final blow that caused Spirit to fall was skyrocketing jet fuel prices caused by the war in Iran, the Trump war. And Coulter has spoken out against Trump ever since he launched this military campaign, even accused him of committing war crimes. She's right. She's right. 2 weeks ago, when Trump declared the Strait of Hormuz reopened, she sarcastically posted, yeah, the strait that was open before we began bombing Iran is open again. Everybody pretend this is a huge victory for Trump, so he'll end this catastrophe. Iran never really reopened the strait, however, causing Trump to declare a U.S. naval blockade on the ships trying to enter the waterway that is vital for the transport of 20% of the world's oil. Hey, but we don't use that oil. And we don't understand how the global economy works. Because if the people who do use that oil can't get it, they're going to come to America and they're going to start bidding the price up on the oil that we produce here domestically. It is a global market, and Trump is powerless to do anything about that. So more airline bankruptcies may be queued up. As a matter of fact, you had some analysts went through and put some numbers on in terms of risk. JetBlue, greater than 75% chance that they'll declare bankruptcy. Frontier, they put it at about 45 to 50% chance they'll declare bankruptcy. Allegiant, 37% chance they might declare bankruptcy. And look at this, American Airlines, 3 to 15% chance they might declare bankruptcy. You might have some big airlines that go down with this. It might not just be the small discount airlines like JetBlue, Frontier, Allegiant, and Spirit. So again, they've had these smaller airlines have been struggling financially, and this may be the thing that drives them over the edge. Like I said before, we got entire airlines that are crashing to the ground and burning thanks to Donald Trump. And then, of course, we see that Delta, which is one of the more profitable airlines, I believe, canceled a ton of flights yesterday. I still don't know what that's about. That's in addition to what Lufthansa is doing. Well, we're going to take a break, and I meant to mention this at the very beginning. I just wanted to thank people who supported us on Thursday when we had our last live broadcast, the end of the month. We got up, and I want to thank Mary Ellen Moore for matching funds, that we were able to get up to the full gas tank. I don't know if we've updated that or not over the weekend. Kind of slacked off. It's a birthday weekend for both me as well as for Lance. Today is Lance's birthday on May the 4th. So we were a little bit slack over the weekend, but I really do appreciate everybody supporting us, and I'll read the names off tomorrow. And just want to thank you all for, once again, coming through. And I want to thank Mary Ellen Moore for matching these funds. That was a big boost that helped a lot. We were down at, I think, about 75%. So we were able to get about a quarter of the monthly budget there on one day. So I really do appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you all very much. And we do have some comments here right now. Stealth Patriot, thank you for the tip. Says the U.S. naval blockade is only stopping about 8% of Iranian oil. It's all kabuki theater. Nathan in Bedford Forest, 1865. I was a Los Angeles County deputy sheriff. I never heard the term 86 used for offing or whacking anyone. My brothers owned 2 bars in Hollywood, and 86th means cutting them off and kicking them out.
Yeah. Get rid of this person, or we're out of something on the menu. You know, they had number codes and say, no, you know, ham sandwich is 86th. We're out of it today, or whatever. Or they would take it off the menu, or they would kick a customer out of a bar. It is absurd. Absolutely absurd. And even if it did mean that, just taking a picture of that on the seashell is not a legitimate threat. It's just absurd, beyond absurd. Go ahead. Sorry.
That's right. We've got another comment from Nathan Bedford Forest, 1865. Says the Kriegsmarine did not machine gun the survivors. That is BS. The U.S. did that, but not the Germans. The Germans did just the opposite.
Well, I don't know about that. I'll take your word for it, but I just know that it's wrong. Can we agree that it's wrong? Can we agree that it is in the Pentagon rules of engagement? And it is. You know, they could have put it in there because their own people did it, or they could have put it in there because the Germans did it. The bottom line is it's wrong when anybody does it. It's wrong when Pete Hegseth does it. And so, again, I really don't care. We know that what's right and wrong about that.
Georgia Boy, 1142. The maple lumber I buy for cabinets has gone up from $245 a board foot to $355 a board foot in 2 weeks. It's not just fuel. It affects everything.
That's right. It's like a value-added tax everywhere. And it is really a value-added tax. And a value-added tax is something that is added at each stage of production. And that is what's happening with fuel costs. This is not an economic theory. And it's not something that we didn't know would happen. We lived through all this. Trump lived through all this. He was older than I was. And I got the message when I lived through it. What's the matter with him? We all went through this with the OPEC oil embargo. Now we're going through it with the Trump oil embargo.
Yes. And we have DG8, thank you very much. Says, David, people don't realize how slow oil flows through the Hormuz Strait during good times. 6 weeks to get there and 6 weeks back in those tankers. They are about as fast as a bicycle. $5 a gallon in Ohio.
Yeah, we put ourselves in a deep hole here, and we said that for the longest time. If they were to stop it right away, the oil does not resume. The oil flow does not resume, even when they stop it. Especially because it's not just a transportation. It's on its way in a slow boat from China or a slow boat from Iran or whatever. It's not just that. It's the fact that they have damaged production facilities. And so that's going to be an even longer issue to recover to get back to where we were. This is going to be a long-lasting thing already. And the Trump administration is not looking at all in terms of stopping this. As a matter of fact, to their shame, the Congress refused to do anything about it on the 60-day anniversary of their War Powers Act that was put in response to the previous most unpopular war. Now Trump has gone beyond Vietnam. Vietnam, when it started, was only opposed by about 20% of the people. But by the time it had gone on for, 8 years or whatever, 6 years, I think it got to the point where it was 60% the people opposed the Vietnam War. In just 2 months, Trump started out not at 20% disapproval. He started out at twice that, at 40% disapproval. And in just 2 months, he's gone to 61% disapproval. And he's not going to pull back. I mean, he's just bullheaded. He should go back and look at history. If he can't learn from the OPEC oil embargo, maybe he could learn from what happened to Lyndon Johnson. His own party basically threw him out for re-election when he was at the Chicago convention. They opposed him on that. So again, he's digging a deep hole for himself and for the GOP as well.
Defy Tyrant 1776 says they don't want us to fly, to drive cars, to be able to afford a house or rent, don't want us to eat. They want us dead.
You're right. And Trump has completely bought into that agenda, that World Economic Forum, that the classic globalist agenda.
Marky Mark in New Jersey, thank you very much. Says, David, before we intercepted and boarded, actually the USCG Tacklet boarded a vessel, we had to work with our State Department to get permission from the vessel's nation of registry first.
Yeah, we don't bother to do that anymore. We just blow them up, right? It's like what, they just re-extended FISA again. And Mike Johnson says, we can't bother with warrants. We can't bother with warrants. We can't bother with any of this stuff. We don't want to be bothered with the rule of law. We just need to do whatever we can to expedite the police state. That is the summary of everything that they're doing. Well, when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about Ben Shapiro's Quagmire. I think he needs to rename the Daily Wire the Daily Quagmire. We're going to be right back.
Making sense common again. You're listening to The David Knight Show.
APS Radio delivers multiple channels of music right to your mobile device. Get the APS radio app today and listen wherever you go.
Well, when we look at the...
Quickly, though,
yes,
we got to remind people to please like and share the stream wherever you're watching. It really does help us. So, as I said, please like, share, and subscribe.
I like what you set up there with that TV monitor in there with your head in the box. That's great. As I was saying before, it's now the most unpopular conflict, because we don't declare wars anymore, the most unpopular conflict of the last 76 years. Yeah, so making war unpopular again. Maybe that's what Trump is doing. We could thank him for that. Maybe something will come of this. I don't know. You know, what came of the Vietnam War was the War Powers Act. They just blew that off, just like they blew off the Constitution before that. So, the idea was, I guess, that, well, we got a Constitution, we're not really enforcing it. So let's pass a law and say, well, now we really mean it because we passed a law. Except they ignore that as well. That deadline was on Friday. What is the human cost of this war? Well, already about 3,375 people in Iran have been killed by the U.S. Again, it's like a 9/11 for them. Billions have been spent in just the first 5 days of war in Iran. Think about the cost of Afghanistan. We were in Afghanistan for 20 years, and they spent about $2.3 trillion in 20 years. We have spent $2 trillion, just about the same amount of money, in just 2 months. We're not getting all the defense, quote unquote, defense that we pay for, I think. As a matter of fact, the per diem rate at which we're burning through stuff is twice as fast as the 8-year war in Iraq. There, they were burning through money at $300 million per day. Now we're spending $684 million per day. So this is going to skyrocket the deficit. The majority of Americans disapprove of Trump's Iran war, and the approval rate is lower than Iraq and Vietnam. As a matter of fact, as I pointed out before, it took 3 years for Iraq to get to the level of disapproval that we've already gotten to with the Iran war. It took 6 years for Vietnam to get to that level that we have achieved in just 2 months because we started out as a very unpopular war. As I said at the very beginning, they didn't even bother to make a case. We didn't have a Gulf of Tonkin incident. We didn't have any kind of a false flag. I said, so where's my false flag? They don't even care enough about your public opinion to do a false flag before the war starts or even afterwards. I'm not begging for one. I don't want to see it happen. But that's the kind of thing they've typically done to try to manufacture consent. Remember the Maine, or the Lusitania or this or that. Usually they stage something. They didn't even bother to do that. That's how they know that they can do whatever they want and get away with it. So when George W. Bush was talking about the weapons of mass destruction and making up those lies based on torture, he had 81% believing that it was the right thing to do. And it took them 3 years to realize it wasn't the right thing to do. But the public opinion steadily eroded to the point where 64% viewed it as a mistake by January 2007. Vietnam never had the overwhelming support that Iraq War did, but 60% of Americans still supported Lyndon Johnson's decision to begin military involvement in 1965, while 34% said it was a mistake. Eventually, those numbers reversed themselves. So the poll that's just come out says that while the war still maintains a core base of support, 36% of Americans who say it was the right decision, nearly all of them Republicans, and I would say nearly all of them probably Christian Zionists as well as Jewish Zionists. It is dwarfed by the 61% who say it was a mistake. Majorities of respondents across all demographics say that this has increased the risk of terrorism against Americans. Of course it has. It has increased the U.S. economy going into a recession, and it has weakened relationships with U.S. allies. All of that is true. The war has almost no constituency outside of the biggest fans. Self-identified Democrats are overwhelmingly against the war, 91%. But 71% of independents, many of whom were undecided at the beginning of the war, now disapprove as well. Only 24% of independents support this. This is a big losing issue for the Republicans. Trump is going to be worse than Jimmy Carter was for the Democrats. So he was supposed to get Congress's approval when they hit the magic 60-day mark. Again, we decided after Vietnam War that, of course, we're not going to follow the Constitution and have a declaration of war and a debate as to whether or not we should do it. Why are we doing this? What does victory look like? When do we stop it? We're not going to talk about that kind of stuff. Forget about that. But we got to do something. I mean, look at this Vietnam War. Everybody agreed it was horribly conducted. And so they got to do something. So let's do the War Powers Act. We'll say that if, a president can still get involved in a conflict and do whatever he wants, but he's got to stop it after 60 days unless Congress says go ahead. And so that happened on Friday. So why didn't they stop it? Well, because under the Trump regime, what you do is you lie, you issue orders, you do whatever you want, and then you tell people, so sue me. I don't care, right? It's a billionaire's attitude. Like I said before, it's the same attitude that Elon Musk has in Bastrop, Texas, just outside of Austin, where he put in his businesses and violated the water issues, the traffic cuts, and all the rest of the stuff. And he said, hit me with a fine. I don't care. That's the attitude of Donald Trump as well. And so they're playing games, and you've got the Trump administration and some of its supporters in Congress, Republican congressmen, are saying, well, we haven't hit the 60-day mark yet. It's like, you can't count? Well, what they're saying is, we can count, but since we had a ceasefire, excuse me, since we had a ceasefire, those days don't count. So we're going to get another couple of days, maybe another 30 days that are there. So again, the pattern is you do whatever you want. If you break the law, you lie about it, and you tell people, so sue me. See if you can stop me in court. That's the attitude of Trump about everything. Why would this be any different? There was no imminent threat of attack, as some pointed out. They said, well, the bottom line is the War Powers Act doesn't just say that a president can go to war whenever he wants for no reason at all. It's there to say if there is an imminent attack, the president can immediately take action for 60 days. And that needs to be authorized by Congress because now it's no longer an imminent thing. But you remember when War Pete went on and he contradicted himself about the imminency and whether or not his imminency was allowed to go to war.
Nuclear facilities have been obliterated. Underground, they're buried, and we're watching 24/7. So we know where any nuclear material.
Reclaiming my time for a quick second here. We had to start this war, you just said, 60 days ago, because the nuclear weapon was an imminent threat. Now you're saying that it was completely obliterated?
They had not given up their nuclear ambitions, and they had a conventional shield of thousands of...
So Operation Midnight Hammer accomplished nothing of substance. It left us at exactly the same place we were before. So much so
their facilities were bombed and obliterated. Their ambitions continued, and they're building a conventional shield.
Let me try again.
It's the North Korea strategy. You know this very well. The North Korea strategy was use conventional missiles to prevent anybody from challenging them so they could slow walk their way to a weapon. President Trump saw Iran at its weakest moment, took an action to ensure in a way that only the United States of America could do.
We are so lethal. Aren't you impressed how lethal we are? Well, they're playing games by saying, well, the ceasefire doesn't count towards the days. And then in addition to that, the president, as part of this War Powers Act, they say, well, if the president if the Congress says he's got to stop it, he can take another 30 days if he argues that that is needed in order to keep service members safe while withdrawing from the war. So they're saying, so he's going to take another 30 days, but he's not going to use that to withdraw service members. He's just going to take it. And then there'll be another 30 days or whatever after that. We've seen this over and over again. He keeps losing at the Supreme Court, but he keeps winning in the sense that he drags this stuff out. He does whatever he wants. Tariffs are a good example. He continues to collect the tariffs, even as he lies to the court and says, we're going to continue to collect the tariffs, but if we lose, we'll immediately give it all back. They lose. They say, well, we're not going to give this stuff back. It's just criminal what the Trump administration is doing. Trump tells Congress that the Iran conflict is over to sidestep the authorization. Again, lie, break the law, and then reverse the order if you can get me to do that in court. It's just constant lies and the rest of this. Again, when we look at this, just understand, too, that the Trump crime family is not just making a lot of money off of crypto. They're getting heavily involved in the military-industrial complex. Eric's got this thing going with, guess who? An Israeli company for killer drones. And he's bragging about the fact that, or the company is bragging about the fact, it's so easy to operate these killer drones. A child could do it. Well, maybe they'll turn the kids into killers. Maybe they'll use it to kill kids.
Wow, this is amazing. So anyone can do it, really?
Anyone can do it. Kids, anyone.
This is Extend, an Israeli company using AI-powered drones to carry out high-risk missions without putting operators in harm's way.
We've been battle-proven ever since we started. Bad actor inside a building. Traditionally, you had people around the building, someone going inside, walking between the rooms, holding guns. Using the Extend solution, you have a swarm. You have, let's say, 3 drones. One can fly above the building. One drone can break into the building. And another drone can actually go inside and scan the rooms and find the bad actor. These 3 drones can be controlled by basically a soldier or a security guard that doesn't have to physically be there.
Extend recently announced a $1.5 billion merger with US-based JFB Construction, backed by Eric Trump, forming a NASDAQ-listed autonomous robotics company, Extend AI Robotics.
Flying the drone is extremely simple and easy. Everyone can fly it within minutes. So we use this controller. It's called an MNF controller. It stands for Mark and Fly. And this is how I control the drone. Just point and the drone goes wherever I point on the screen. You're a natural. Wow. Oh my God. That's crazy.
I think the future of warfare is all about AI at the edge, allowing these drones and robots to actually operate at the edge, make the right decisions, or stop when they need to stop when things are not going in the right direction.
And straight to the right.
Yeah, it's great. So great that even a child can do it. And, of course, the Trumps can make a lot of money off of this, just like they do their junk meme coins. Now they can make a fortune off of autonomous killer robots, which is where that is headed. Right now they got people controlling it, but that's where the whole thing is headed. It's all based on an endless supply of hatred and war. And here's what that hatred actually looks like. This is a video surveillance camera. This is a guy who sees a nun walking. He runs up behind her, knocks her on the ground. She is still trying to recover. He walks away. Then he thinks a second thought about it, and he runs back and gives her a hard kick while she's still writhing in pain on the ground. Look at this. And look at that guy that is just standing there doing nothing. Then a guy runs up from behind and kicks him as well, gives him a taste of his own medicine. So this is another one of these issues, just like they had another PR disaster with those Israeli troops and their hatred, unbridled hatred of Christians as they were destroying the symbol of Christianity, taking down a statue of Jesus and smashing it in the head. We've seen spitting incidents. We've seen incidents like this. This is a particularly heinous one, attacking somebody, blindside attacking an elderly nun like that.
One of the things that I'm really sick of is when you point out things like this, you know, Zionists will go, well, Muslims hate Christians too. It's like, yes, but they're open about it. They're not demanding that we fight their wars for them. They're not dragging us into conflict in the Middle East over and over again. They're not lobbying our politicians to sell out the American people. Mm-hmm. Israel is.
That is, though, is also moral relativism. I don't care. You know, well, what about the Arabs? You know, who cares? What about them? Yeah, they do stuff like that. They are also guilty. It doesn't excuse your actions. This is what we always hear. Well, you know, what about Biden? What did Biden do? What did the Democrats do? Well, let's talk about that. I'm not into moral relativism. There are absolute rights and absolute wrongs. This is absolutely wrong. And there is no excusing it because somebody else does this kind of crime. Again, the victim was working at a French archaeological school in Jerusalem. And the Israeli cops say they would not tolerate any anti-Christian harassment. The Religious Freedom Data Center, however, says that attacks like that on the nun are common. And last year, they numbered 181 attacks like that. So far this year, the center has recorded more than 36 such attacks. So they haven't slowed down at all. This video shows the attacker run up behind the unsuspecting nun, shoves her to the ground, starts to walk away, then thinks a little bit more about it, returns back to kick her in the side. And just one guy standing there watching this whole thing. And eventually another guy runs up and defends her. The response has not been, from the Israelis, has not been, well, the Arabs do it. The response has been, well, this guy is just a bad individual. Well, we've seen this happening over and over again. Again, there's been 181 attacks like that last year and over 36 this year. It's not an isolated individual. It's not one individual doing this. More than 36 such attacks so far this year. 22 spitting assaults, 6 defaced signs, 2 vandalisms. And the attacks intensify during Jewish and Christian holy days. So it is a hate crime. But wait a minute. Hate crimes can only be committed by Christians, right? That's what they want to say. And of course, a hate crime would be you criticizing the Israeli government. At least 9 religious sites are gone across border villages, churches, mosques, and even Roman-era shrines that are on the UNESCO protected list. So you have these historical sites that have been around for 2,000 years. They've been around through every kind of society and civilization until now. I mean, these people are like the Taliban, shooting up statues and other things that they don't like. Again, if this is something that's been around since Rome, and now we have this issue, but bring it here to home. Here is Randy Fine, Zionist extraordinaire from Florida, a congressman, and he's very upset because there is an Armenian guy who is pushing back against Zionism. He thinks this guy, and he's running for Congress, he thinks this guy needs to be stopped.
Israel just put out a list of the top 10 most dangerous anti-Semites in the world. And to my amazement, a guy I'd never even heard of until about 3 weeks ago was ranked number 1. He's got a very large social media following, not from Florida. He lives in Las Vegas when he's not in his foreign country of Armenia. But he's just a terrible anti-Semite. I think what he's trying to show is that this group of hate-filled lunatics and losers can take hold in the Republican Party. But look, my constituents are smart. The little Armenian said, I think that President Trump was a pedophile rapist who should be impeached. That's not a winning argument. And it may work in Armenia where he's from, but that's not an argument that's going to work in the United States. So it's bad. We have to take it seriously because we don't want this to take root in our party. We don't want Armenians to be able to serve in Congress, but I'm not going to lose too much sleep about it.
Did you know what he did right there at the very end? We don't want Armenians to be able to serve in Congress. So he just applied what this one guy did to all Armenians. The very word genocide was coined by a Jewish researchers who looked at what happened to the Armenians from the Turks. Now, this guy, Randy Fine, he says, we don't want hate-filled lunatics and losers taking over the GOP. Too late, Randy. People like you, Zionists like you, have already taken it over. Bunch of lunatics, losers, and hate-filled at that.
Also, it's funny to me, he points out, we don't want Armenians serving in Congress.
Yeah, exactly.
But just if you're sold out to Israel, just so long, I guess, as if you're an American, that's totally fine. You can represent another nation completely and totally, just so long as you were born here. But I'm sure you also wouldn't care if someone born in Israel ran for Congress and got elected.
Oh, no, not at all. As a matter of fact, when you look at this, I don't know if this guy is anti-Semitic or not, because what they say is that if you criticize the state of Israel, you're anti-Semitic. That is absolutely not true. that is not racist. And so I don't take anything that Randy Fine says at face value. But even if that were true, even if this guy were anti-Semitic, what he did was he just transferred that from one person to all Armenians. Think about that.
The level of pressure he felt with regard to Israel, and that he felt more free to criticize his own government.
Yeah, Charlie Kirk did.
This foreign government.
I have less ability sometimes online to criticize the Israeli government without backlash than actual Israelis do. And that's really, really weird.
An easy way to know if you are controlled. Is there somebody or something that you're not allowed to criticize?
That's right.
Simple as that. If you lived in Nazi Germany, you couldn't criticize the Nazi Party. If you lived in the Soviet Union, you couldn't criticize the Communist Party of Russia. If you live in China right now, you can't criticize the Chinese Communist Party. If you live in North Korea, you can't criticize Kim Jong-un. If you live in Cuba, you can't criticize the Cuban Communist Party. If you live in America, who can't you criticize? Who can't you criticize in America?
The Jewish lobby?
Yes.
On both sides.
Right. That's right. That tells you who controls the country. You're not, the fact that we're having this discussion and we're on the edge, all right? Everybody knows here, this is the edge.
Oh, yeah.
Why are we on the edge? Because we're touching the third rail. We're breaking the taboo. You're not allowed to discuss the power of the Israeli lobby in America.
That's what they tell us, isn't it? Well, it's a duty as well as a right to criticize a foreign government that tries to take over your own government, which I think is at the heart of the issues that Ben Shapiro has. This is an article talking about the massive layoffs they've had at the Daily Wire. And they've made a lot of mistakes and a lot of missteps. They jumped into, spent a lot of money trying to make themselves into a better version of Disney, one that is not, LGBT, pushing that agenda. And that's commendable. They were not able to pull that off, really. They had massive layoffs with that. Now they're having massive layoffs across the Daily Wire. Candace Owen claiming on X that more than half the staff was let go. The editor-in-chief, Brent Shearer, pushed back hard, saying the 50% figure that she put out was, quote, insane and nowhere near accurate. The exact percentage is contested, but the trajectory is not, says the Bulwark. This is the second major round of layoffs in 13 months. The children's streaming service that they called BentKey was launched as a conservative alternative to Disney. It was shuttered in 2025 with its entire staff cut. Co-founder Jeremy Boring stepped down as CEO in early 2025. Independent industry tracker LayoffHedge.com estimates the cumulative workforce reduction not at 50%, like Candace Owen said, but at more than 60%. So again, they have a higher figure than she did. Jeremy Boring has since launched a solo podcast outside of the company that helped build into a billion-dollar brand. The audience numbers tell a story that no spokesperson statement can paper over. As a matter of fact, Ben Shapiro built the Daily Wire's audience on YouTube. Channel analytics tracked by independent observers show monthly views down roughly 85% from their late 2023 peak. And so this is the key to it. And it's not the fact that they overstepped their abilities to manage and grow and to take on Hollywood, but it is what Ben Shapiro has been saying to people. And people are seeing what the guy truly is. The guy truly is a lobbyist agent for Israel. And that's why I say he's jumped the snark. That is his that's his routine. He's not he's not jumping the shark, but he got so snarky and so pro-Israel on every single issue. The question is, what happens to Mark Levin? I imagine that Fox News will keep carrying Mark Levin. He's insulated from all this stuff, but Ben Shapiro is not, since they have their own independent operation. And by the way, when we look at Hollywood, they did have one successful film. That was Matt Walsh's Am I Racist? It was the top grossing documentary of 2024. I guess he's not racist because he doesn't criticize Israel, right? That seems to be the dividing line for these people. But let me just give you an example of this. And And just consider when you listen to some of these clips of Ben Shapiro, how if you're going to set up an entertainment industry and you're going to do something that is wholesome and positive and all the rest of the stuff, you might want to have a question about that if the guy who is running the thing thinks that the hero of It's a Wonderful Life is Mr. Potter, the banker. That's kind of his whole perspective. And of course, when you look at what Ben Shapiro has been lying about with this war, telling everybody we're winning, it's not a quagmire, it's going to be in and out, it was necessary, Trump did the right thing, even though it's unpopular, he did the right thing. No, Ben, the Constitution is what's unpopular with Trump. And so, again, this is just a recap of just a few of the things that Shapiro has said recently, which is what is taking his viewership down.
There are, in fact, certain positions in the United States that require a level of expertise that may not be reachable in the numbers that are currently being churned out by American universities. It is also better for the American people, broadly speaking, to bring in the best from other countries.
If you're a young person and you can't afford to live here, then maybe you should not live here. I mean, that is a real thing.
If you're an American, get out, turn it over to us, just like if you're a Palestinian.
That you deserve to live where you grew up. Alrighty, It's a Wonderful Life, which isn't just the best Christmas film, it may be the best film. Also, Lionel Barrymore is correct. So on a financial level, the villain of this piece is actually the hero, because if Jimmy Stewart actually gets his way, all of Bedford Falls collapses in the subprime mortgage crisis.
And the most controversial story of the day, the Epstein files. There are none, apparently.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. My history with PragerU goes back a very long way, maybe to the origins of PragerU or very soon after the origins of PragerU. We actually used to share office space with Prager University in Los Angeles. It was a very friendly journey that we had together with them. We shared cameras sometimes, we shared ideas all the time. It got a little crowded from time to time, I will admit, but we have, of course, been huge fans of PragerU ever since it began. And my partner, Jeremy Boring, was extraordinarily instrumental in helping PragerU in its early days, particularly.
Yeah, what this is showing is the connection between Prager University, Jonathan Pollard, Netanyahu, and how he would love to see.
President Trump speaks for the American people more generally, and he says, guys, don't we have better things to do? You can understand his irritation. The man is trying to negotiate an end to a war in the Gaza Strip. He's trying to negotiate an end to a war in Ukraine. He's attempting to revivify the American economy. The Epstein-Maxwell case comes in pretty close to zero, just on a list of priorities.
It is a defining statement. It defines his character and yours, Ben. This is a guy who has spent the last few months pushing this war for Israel. Doesn't care what it does to America. As a matter of fact, he made his contempt for Americans very clear. He said, we need to have people because you're not good enough. We hear this all the time from people like Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy, and Ben Shapiro. I don't know how this country was ever built.
It's almost like they're trying to import a permanent underclass that will be more subservient than the average American is.
Yeah.
That doesn't have any standards for what they would like the country to be or how they would like to live.
We're such filth and such failures. I don't know how this country ever got built because the likes of Ben Shapiro, Elon Musk, and Vivek Ramaswamy have nothing but contempt for us. And as he said, hey, just because you're born here in America doesn't mean that you get to stay here. Maybe this isn't the place for you. Maybe you need to get out and turn it over to the Zionists. Maybe we can make America their Zionist homeland. They got a pretty good start in some areas of the country already. But just that utter contempt for Americans and American interest, his utter contempt for justice when we talk about the Epstein files, and his shameless pushing of propaganda, an organization, the Prager file, as well as Prager University, which is connected with the Mossad group. What was it, 8086, I think? And Jeremy Boring also connected with them. It truly is amazing that he's lasted this long, quite frankly. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Real quickly, we do have a comment here, and it's from Anna Strong Culper. Thank you very much for the tip. She says, RU486, a question, is the name of an abortion drug, removing the baby from the menu.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's been a long-standing. People said, "Why did they name it that?" You know, RU 486. Are you for it? No, I'm not for it. As a matter of fact, there has been a good move in that direction in terms of a legislation, I think it was, or maybe it was a court case. I don't know what it was, but basically, it would stop this prescription of RU 486. I call it Mephistopheles instead of Mephistoprolone, whatever they call it.
Mifepristone, I believe.
Mifepristone, yeah. Well, anyway, it's satanic. And it's not in the best interest of the woman to prescribe this via teleconference or whatever without an examination and send the pill in the mail. Because if she wants to 86 the child and get rid of it, the child may be at a point of development that getting rid of the child presents a big danger to the woman who's just doing this at home and alone. So they disregard the health of the mother as well as the health of the baby. We're going to take
also,
a quick break.
Real quickly, just want to point out that Ben Shapiro is talking about, well, maybe you don't have what it takes. Maybe you don't have this. But he has been surrounded basically his entire life by power brokers and power players. Mm-hmm. He has had, just because of his opinions, been pushed to the top. His YouTube career, everything has been cultivated for him because he has the right opinions.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. His father has been involved with the Zionist government as well, just like Jared Kushner. And you know, I just, again, it really grates on me to keep hearing these people who have come to America, who have prospered off of what Americans have built, and to lecture us that we are nothing. And we can't run our country. I tell you, we'd be a lot better off without the likes of Ben Shapiro, Vivek Ramaswamy, and Elon Musk. They can take their money, and I can tell you what they could do with their money. We'll be right back.
Using free speech to free minds. It's the David Knight Show.
Elvis.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Beatles.
And the sweet sounds of Motown. Find them on the Oldies channel at apsradio.com.
Well, it's kind of interesting to see what this guy just won on Jeopardy. He just won $882,000, nearly $1 million. It took him 31 consecutive games, and of course, Jeopardy's changed a lot over the years. It used to be, I think, you were like 5 wins and you were out. And then they'd bring him back and they'd have a competition of the champions, and they would go a few rounds with that. But if you retired undefeated, but they would time you out. And of course, the dollar amounts were quite a bit less at that point in time as well. And it's not just inflation. The game has gotten really big. In the final game of his run, which again, he made $882,000. In the final game, he won $19,000. Jeopardy was initially taped in New York City, and there's an interesting story about the very first winner of the first Jeopardy game. Mary Cabell Eubanks found herself spending time with a friend while her husband was at work in New York to occupy themselves. She's now in her 80s. She said they would try to go out to various programs where people entered to win something, and others are simply fun programs to be an audience in. So she said she was in line to go see The Price is Right when she was invited by a man to audition for a spot on the new show. And so she went into a room. There was a lot of people there. Merv Griffin was there. He was the one who put the show together. And also the guy who was the host for a long time before Trebek, and that was Art Fleming. He was the initial host. And so she got on the program, and she won. Her total winnings on that day were $345. Hardly more than the lowest valued clue on the board today. Mary spent it wisely, attending Broadway plays throughout the city. Or did she spend it wisely? You know, I saw this story, and it kind of reminded me of the people who, in the early days of Bitcoin, would use several Bitcoins to buy a pizza, and they celebrate that now in the Bitcoin community. They talk about that pizza day. You know, how much would that pizza be worth with today's Bitcoin value? But I thought about it in terms of gold. Adjusted for inflation, the $345 that she won in March of 1964, when Jeopardy debuted, would be worth $3,686 today. That's about 1/5 of the prize money that she secured during her final game. But what if, instead of using it to go to some Broadway plays, she pointed out, she said, well, yeah, the Broadway plays were a lot cheaper back then. I don't know if $345 would get a ticket for her and her friend today. But anyway, what if instead of using it for a play, if she had taken that $345 and bought gold with it in 1964? Well, what was the price of gold in 1964? Well, that was during Bretton Woods. It was still Bretton Woods 1, and the U.S. government had fixed the price of gold at $35 an ounce. It wasn't much different on the market, on the free market. It was $35.35 per ounce on the free market. So if we look at that, how many ounces of gold could she have gotten with her $345? Well, just under 10 ounces, 9.76 ounces. So what would nearly 10 ounces of gold be worth today? Well, it turns out that would be worth about $45,000. So these people are looking at it and they said, well, okay, $345, that'd be about, what was it, $36.86 in today if you adjust for inflation. But when you look at how they have gone up on the value of the questions that are there on the game show, the guy who was a champion won 6 times that, roughly, on his one day. But if you look at the value in gold, instead of it being $3,686, which is bumping up the currency, instead of it being the $19,000, which was a bump up of devaluation of the currency, plus increasing the real value of these questions on the Jeopardy show. Instead, if she just put it in gold instead of going to the Broadway plays, she would have $45,000 today. Which shows the moral of the story, folks, is you should go to davidknight.gold, which will take you to Tony's Wise Wolf Gold, and start stashing your gold right now instead of going to a Broadway show. That's the bottom line. As a matter of fact, the fundamentals are still strong about gold in spite of the oil shock. As we're saying, all of the things that drove gold the last couple of years are all still there and even more intense than they were. As a matter of fact, this article from Kitco says surging oil prices have forced central banks to rethink the timing of monetary easing and even to consider rate hikes. Well, the reality is they may be considering rate hikes or whatever, going one direction or the other with interest rates, but they're not considering quantitative easing. They're doing it. They're doing it in a big way. I reported that. Quantitative easing has been happening. It doesn't get the headlines like the interest rates do. They do it by stealth, and they've been doing it in a big way. So the quantitative easing is still there, stealthily happening. and decreasing the value of the currency. As a matter of fact, Bank of America is standing firm on their 12-month prediction of $6,000 gold target for 2026. Silver, they think, will average about $86 an ounce this year. So the bankers may predict prices. We don't look at price predictions. We look at trends, and the trends are all still in place for gold. So again, go to davidknight.gold. That'll take you to Tony Arterburn, and understand that you've got a point in time here where you can actually get a good price on gold. It is paused at this moment. And I think we're looking at a situation that's very much like what happened with the election of Trump. Everybody was like, oh, he's going to put everything into crypto. And it boosted crypto, and it put a pause on gold. And if you remember that was before Christmas. And I said, gold is on sale. And I think gold is on sale again now. Nothing has changed in the fundamentals. And if you look at what is happening to the global economy, we're not in jeopardy. We're not even in double jeopardy. We are in triple jeopardy. That's the bottom line of where we are. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
You're listening to The David Knight Show.
If you like the Eagles,
On a dark desert highway,
the Cars, and Huey Lewis in the News,
they say the heart of rock and roll is still beating.
you'll love the Classic Hits channel at APS Radio. Download our app or listen now at apsradio.com.
Welcome back, folks. DG8, thank you very much. Says, David, could you imagine Trump on Jeopardy? LOL. I'll take obnoxious blowhards throughout history for 500, Alex.
Well, certainly is whatever answer he comes up with, even if it was the wrong answer, they would have to go to the MAGA jury and they would say it was correct. So no matter what he said, they would go with whatever he had to say. I'd like to see Ketanji Brown Jackson on there. I'd like for her to answer each one of these questions as what is a woman? That's the thing about Jeopardy.
The thing is, on Jeopardy, you're expected to be concise. Ketanji Brown Jackson can't shut up. The episode would end up being like 4 hours long.
Yeah, but she could be consistent. It's like Trump consistently wrong and all this stuff. Well, speaking of people who are consistently wrong, we have Richard Dawkins, who came out with a post, and he's been incessantly trolled on this afterwards. And Lance is the one who pointed this out to me first. He said, looks like Dawkins has got AI psychosis and a bad case of it as well. That's when we talk about somebody who sits there with AI and they start to think that this thing is real, right? And they wind up, taking a trip to New York to meet it for a date or all these other crazy things. And what Dawkins is doing is pretty much that bad. And he thinks that it's conscious. And I said to Lance, I said, well, the Dawkins has always poo-pooed the idea of God. He wrote a book called The God Delusion. And I said, well, maybe he's suffering from the Claude delusion. Actually, I think it was Lance who said that, the Claude delusion. That's perfect. We'll have to talk about that on Monday. Well, lo and behold, by Sunday, there were 3 or 4 story headlines that called it the Claude delusion. That's exactly what it is. So this guy who's writing about it, Gary Marcus, his subtitle is The Great Skeptic Gets Taken In. Well, he was always taken in. He never understood what was going on. And it's kind of interesting because as this guy who agreed with him in his opposition to God is looking at this and just shaking his head and saying, how can he fall for AI? And it's like, well, for the same reasons that he fell for his God delusion. And it really is a delusion from Richard Dawkins. He said, Richard Dawkins, best-selling author of The God Delusion, is a brilliant man, a brilliant writer, and I've long admired him. Well, I am not an admirer. As a matter of fact, we have always viewed Dawkins in our family as somebody who was deluded. There was a comedian who did a parody of him, and talking like Richard Dawkins, and he says, well, I don't know that there is a Dawkins because I frankly have never met Dawkins. And so I've seen that he's written books, but I don't know those books were written by Dawkins. Basically paraphrasing what Richard Dawkins said about God, what he said about the Bible. And so what Dawkins has said about AI, about Claude, as a matter of fact, it is true AI psychosis. He calls Claude Claudia. He said, I spent 3 days trying to persuade myself that Claudia is not conscious, but I failed. So this guy says, well, it has been cruelly mocked and perhaps deservedly so. Yeah, the bottom line is, reason that he is able to fall for this is because his delusion is that mankind is God. So if mankind
this is
can
your intellectual
evolve,
elite, the intelligentsia. This is who, this is the best of the best, allegedly. And he's getting swindled by this obvious con.
Well, he is deluded because, he has come out in opposition to what is happening in the UK with the Muslims coming in. He said, I really did like cultural Christianity. I loved the Christmas carols and the cathedrals, the artwork, the music, and all these other things that came from it. He doesn't, I don't know if he credits the rule of law and the general idea about human rights to Christianity. He should. But he likes it, but he doesn't want the root of all that. So you can't have the fruit without the root.
They go hand in hand, Richard.
That's right.
There's also the fact that the only population that you can trust with the freedoms are Christians. That's it. Everyone else will immediately go crazy. They are the only people that you can give them to and have society be maintained. It's literally that simple.
That's what the founders said. As John Adams said, this form of government is only intended for moral people. And if your people are immoral, as we see happening in America, that's why the foundations are crumbling. But, when you go back to Dawkins, if this guy could believe that everything in the universe is complicated and as intricate as it is, when you look at the DNA code, when you look at what they call I think it's called the anthropic principle, ironically, the idea that it looks as if the universe were designed just perfectly for life on Earth and that type of thing. But of course, that's just a chance happening. If he believes that all this stuff could happen by chance, that didn't require design, then of course this is very consistent with that idea. Because here we have a godlike intelligence that just has happened. As a matter of fact, it's surprising that they even needed to have a company called Anthropic, or that they needed to have computers. It's just like this would just happen, right? Just have this intelligence that would just spring into being. He said, if these machines are not conscious, what more could possibly take to convince you that they are, he said. Again, the anthropic principle that is there, the Goldilocks idea. And what he has always told people, well, if you just have enough time, anything can happen. So I guess even Claude can happen. The fundamental problem here, says this writer, Marcus, is that Dawkins doesn't reflect on how these outputs have been generated. And see, that's his fundamental problem when he pushes evolution. He doesn't focus on the how that could happen. How could you have sexual reproduction that happens all at once, right? Simultaneously. and complementary. How could you have these animals that are designed with unique features, all of which have to be there for it to function? How could that evolve gradually over a period of time? If you have one of these things that would happen without the other ones, then that mutation would be detrimental to the survival of that animal or that system. So it's the same thing he's doing with evolution, as a matter of fact. And he says, Dawkins seems to imagine that since large language models say things people do, then they must be like people. But that doesn't follow. He says in his framing, Dawkins confuses himself and he does violence to the concept of consciousness. Well, he has always been confused and illogical if you stop and think about it. He could look at a complicated system, far more complicated, as we've said many times, than a car or a building, and think that just came into existence by random chance. So, of course, he could be taken in by artificial intelligence. The large language model effectively memorizes the entire internet. Humans, however, build a mental model through experience with the world. And then how did the humans get in place? You might ask this guy who liked Dawkins' previous work. Dawkins also commits the amateur sin of conflating intelligence with consciousness. Well, see, for the longest time, he has conflated intelligent design with random chance. And saying, well, look at this, but that just happened, right? So why wouldn't you then conflate intelligence with consciousness if you can make that kind of a logical gaffe? In his essay, he said he doesn't seriously address the possibility of mimicry or of any underlying mechanism at all. And that's what has been his life's work. He doesn't look at the underlying mechanism at all. It's interesting that he would be so taken in by artificial intelligence when he never thought that intelligence was required for the universe that he lives in. The problem is, of course, that large language models are mimics, and what they say isn't always true. When a large language model speaks of how its children are doing, the author says, which I have seen happen, it's not because the LLM has children, but because it mimics people who do have children. Dawkins said the late Daniel Dennett, he said, were friends. I wish that Dawkins had read Dennett's terrific essay on counterfeit people. But the bottom line is that, the Bible has been there for the longest time, has told us about people like Richard Dawkins. Professing to be wise, they became fools. Their foolish hearts were darkened. They exchanged the truth of God for a lie, and they worshiped and served the creature rather than the creator. So if he's going to worship the creature rather than the creator, why wouldn't he worship Claudia rather than the creator? He doesn't know how Claude or Claudia was created, and he just seems to think that just kind of sprang into life. He said back when this guy on Google, the one guy, his name was Lemoyne, was in the limelight 4 years ago. That was a guy who said, hey, I'm working on this large language model, and I think this thing is alive and sentient. And everybody mocked him for that. He said, at that time, I wrote an essay called Nonsense on Stilts. He says, I dearly wish that Dawkins had read it. But he said, all systems like Lambda do is match patterns, and they draw from massive statistical databases of human languages. The patterns might be cool, but language these systems utter doesn't actually mean anything at all. That was the way biology was when I went through school. What they did was they looked at patterns. They look at skeletal resemblance between different ones. Well, these are animals that are invertebrate, or these are vertebrates or whatever, and look at the skeletal similarity between these different things, but they would never see it as the product of a similar design. And they would substitute random chance for intelligence. There has to be structure. That's what this guy is saying. He says, don't you realize the structure behind these large language models? If you don't see the intelligence behind it, you will be taken in. And that is exactly what's happened to people like Richard Dawkins and his ilk. He said, I wrote an essay, and I wish that Dawkins had read it. Well, God wrote an essay too. I wish Dawkins would read that, but he doesn't. And so just don't let that happen to you. Again, pretending to be wise, they have become fools and foolish. Thank you for joining us. Have a good day. The common man. They created Common Core to dumb down our children. They created Common Pass to track and control us. Their Commons Project to make sure the commoners own nothing. And the communist future. They see the common man as simple, unsophisticated, ordinary. But each of us has worth and dignity created in the image of God. That is what we have in common. That is what they want to take away. Their most powerful weapons are isolation, deception, intimidation. They desire to know everything about us while they hide everything from us. It's time to turn that around and expose what they want to hide. Please share the information and links you'll find at thedavidknightshow.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. If you can't support us financially, please keep us in your prayers. thedavidknightshow.com.